Morning. Good morning, morning, morning. I'm just going to see if I am live. It says I'm live, but I don't see a counter yet. Yes, there I am. Okay, morning. So, if you're not too bored of me yet, I have another little anatomy chunk for you this morning. This is day 5 of my free mini anatomy training, and it is the last day of the free mini anatomy training because next week I'm doing the actual paid for anatomy training, which is a longer course, 20 hours. It's CPD for yoga teachers, massage therapists. It's really interesting for yoga practitioners who maybe have injuries or are just really into the biomechanics of the body. So that's starting on Monday and it's running for 6 weeks. We meet on Monday mornings from 10 till 12. And they're recorded, so if you can't make them, you can catch up. There's a resources page where I put them. There's pre-recorded videos for experiential feeling into what you've learnt, and there's PDFs with the written information, so a whole range of ways of learning. And I still have one space left which can be discounted. I mean, I can take lots of people, but I was giving away 3 discounted spaces this week. So there's one more space. So for example, if you just want to take advantage of this ridiculous special offer, and you're not in a position to do it now, have it. It can be in your tool bank, or if you can rearrange things and make it live, it's always better to come to the live because you can ask questions and you're not kind of zoning out. You know, there's this kind of expectation to be there and, you know, make eye contact and stuff. So anyway, today's final piece is going to be the gluteus medius. So we have looked at the rotator cuff. That was the first day, which was Monday. We then looked at the spinal structures, and we looked at all the gnarly kind of way that the spine is created, the spinous processes, the transverse processes, the facet joints, the body of the vertebrae, the discs in between the bodies, the vertebral foramen, which the spinal cord goes through, the nerves coming out in between each one. Wow, we went into loads of detail, didn't we? In a speed dating kind of anatomy way, you know, in which I'm teaching this week. Then we looked at the iliopsoas, which was for hip. It's your hip flexor, but it also does position the pelvis and the lumbar curve. Then yesterday we looked at, what did we look at yesterday? Quadratus lumborum, side stability, 2 pillars of stability on the side of the lumbar spine, each side, which obviously, as well as the psoas, which is in 2 chunks at the front of the spine, quadratus lumborum on the side of the spine, erector spinalis on the back of the spine. They are all helping you to balance out and stabilize the lumbar spine. Also position the pelvis from right to left, forward to back. So they're very important muscles. Another really amazing hip stabilizer that we're going to look at today is the gluteus medius. So everyone's heard of the glutes. The glutes are your bum, but mainly when we're talking about glutes, we're talking about gluteus maximus, and that is the maximus, the big chunk, the junk in the trunk. That's mostly what we are thinking of when we think of glutes, because we're thinking of the back. Gluteus maximus is the kind of opposition to psoas. So where psoas is giving you hip flexion, pulling at the front, gluteus maximus is pulling you at the back, giving you a hip extension. So they're kind of playing this little game together. But remember, we have a joint. We have the head of the femur, which is the ball of the joint, sitting in this socket, which is called the acetabulum, which is in the which is part of the pelvis. Here's my pelvis. Here's what I made earlier. So this is my femur bone, greater trochanter, lesser trochanter. These are just knobbles on the outside and inside of the top of the femur bone, which, you know, normally if there's knobbles, they're going to be hooks for muscles. Then I have the neck of the femur and the head of the femur. That's the ball. The socket is a beautiful socket made up of the 3 bones of the pelvis, and that's called the acetabulum. So what happens with gluteus medius? This is the back. Gluteus maximus is on the back, so it's kind of catching the rim of the back of the ilium bones, and it's coming down, and it actually becomes the iliotibial band, so it sort of comes down and in a little bit. So as well as taking you into hip extension, it also kind of internally rotates because it's coming down to the side. It's coming down from the back to the side. So if I'm shortening that, I'm taking my leg back, but I'm also taking it out a little bit. Anyway, you don't need to know all that today. Gluteus medius is on the side of the hip. So side on It's catching the outside rim of the ilium bones, and it's coming down from the side down to the greater trochanter. So it's actually coming more downwards. The fibers are going more vertically, and they're on the side. So let's find them in our own body. So if you bring your hands around your waist, fingers forward, thumbs back, and you just press down, what you'll find under your fingers and thumbs is your ilium bones. Now if I follow them around to the front, I've got my hip bones here. And if I follow them around to the back, I'll find some knobbles where the pelvis is sitting on the sacrum. But this whole round at the side are the ilium bones. So these are your ears of the ilium. And so this is where the gluteus medius sits at the top on the side. And then if you find your greater trochanter now, so greater trochanter is level with the pubic bone, and it's the widest part of your upper thigh. And if you find your pubic bone, you go out to the side and you just wiggle around, you'll find bone there. That is greater trochanter. So we've got ilium bone here, greater trochanter here. So the muscle is going from this finger to this finger, and it's kind of sitting there. So I can imagine that because they're on the outside of the body, the function of these muscles is to abduct my leg, because when I shorten and bring these 2 points together, so the point where it starts and the point where it ends, so the ilium bones and the greater trochanter, when I bring those points closer together, which is a muscle's job, right? They're levers to give you movement. Then my leg, as I bring these 2 points together, ilium bone, greater trochanter, my leg is going to go off and be abducted by the aliens. Abduction, right? So then that's its main job. However, this is a deep muscle. Remember we talked about the rotator cuff on day one. The deep muscles, because it's underneath gluteus maximus, it's deep and it's small. Remember, the superficial muscles are big and they're on the outside and they're prime movers. They're doing all of our action. The deeper muscles and are smaller, they are stabilizers. So the gluteus medius becomes one of the main stabilizers of the outside of the hip joint, which means what it's trying to do is keep that head of the femur snug inside. So you can imagine, this is the back view, and my hand is the side, the hand is the gluteus medius, and there's minimus as well underneath, which is even smaller and even more kind of stabilizing. It's keeping my leg from kind of going out and getting out of joint here. And you can imagine that the more snugly I fit into my acetabulum, the more range of motion and the healthier I'm going to be in my tissues inside, because inside we have this kind of lip called the labrum, which is cartilage. We have all this lovely cartilage which is kind of smooth, and it's like an ice skating rink where everything's going to glide. But as I wear that down, it's going to run out and it's going to be more painful, bone hitting bone. So the more snug I can sit in my acetabulum, the better I am. So then the gluteus medius is stopping me from laying into my joint. When we say laying into my joint, it's this action that we all do. I'm terrible for it, and we'll all do it on one side. So you're waiting for a bus, you're standing around, you're carrying a baby on your hip so that you can actually do the cooking. And if you've ever had babies, you'll know that if you want to balance yourself out and try and put the baby on the other hip, they'll slip down, because by the time you think, oh, I need to balance it out, you've already given yourself this imbalance. So we're all guilty of that. So you can imagine that as I lay into I sag out here, these points are moving away from each other. So it's lengthening, so it's stretching, but it's inactive, it's passive. And I don't need to stretch these muscles. These aren't muscles that get very, very overused, that need to be stretched out. This is a muscle that needs to be strong and supportive. So how do we make it strong? How do we make it supportive? Well, if we abduct the leg against gravity, that's going to make this muscle shorten and work very hard. Remember, we add gravity to anything and it makes it work really hard. So abducting against gravity would mean, for example, if I do a half moon here, taking my leg up, Gravity wants my leg to fall down, but I am abducting it against gravity, lifting it up, shortening here, and I feel this tire. And I'll also, quite interestingly, the QL a bit further up, they're kind of doing the similar role. So anything when the QL is stretching on the side, usually gluteus medius is stretching on the side as well. And then if I take that the other way, so imagine that I'm now going to do a side plank. I'm abducting this side against gravity as I push if I lift my hips up, push the floor away, I'm shortening here and abducting against gravity. So that's a way of kind of strengthening it, these kind of like shortening at the sides against gravity. In terms of stretching it out, we don't need to stretch it out very much, but you can imagine that if I want to stretch it, I'm going to adduct. So any time that I'm moving my legs, squeezing them in or crossing them over the midline, I'm going to be giving it a little stretch. You can imagine if I'm doing cow head, if I was sitting down like this, I'm crossing those legs. I'm also externally rotating the legs and adding all sorts of other movements, but you can imagine that kind of crossing over the midline. But like I say, we don't need to stretch these very much. But the main takeaway from the gluteus, making me out of breath, it's so exciting. Gluteus medius is so exciting. The main takeaway from gluteus medius is that it stabilizes the hip when we are on one leg. So for example, if I'm walking, I'm switching my weight from one foot to the other. If I'm running, I'm switching my leg from one foot to the other, my weight from one foot to the other. If I am doing balancing poses in the yoga where I'm treading on one leg or the other, then this is when gluteus medius needs to kick in and really hold me stable, hold that head of the femur stable in its socket. So instead of kind of standing like that, laying into the hip joint, if I'm going to go into a tree pose, I'm going to, instead of sagging the hip out, I'm going to press my foot down and lift my crown up and really lengthen up and lengthen down, and this is going to stabilize that hip joint when I'm standing on one leg. Same the other side. So whenever I'm standing on one leg, when I'm walking, standing on one leg, so I'm not walking like that, I'm walking so that my hips, I mean, we have a little bit of movement. You need a little bit of movement in the hips when you walk forward, but it's actually stabilizing. It's turning on automatically every time you stand on one leg. Once you've nourished this muscle enough, once you've kind of located it in your mind, then you can allow it to switch on every time you're standing on one leg. So sometimes people do these amazing things where you will do a balance standing on a block. So let me just grab a block and show you. For example, I'm not going to be able to see my foot now. You can see all my mess too, my slippers there. If I'm going to do the balancing pose standing on one block, that's a really good way of training me to press my foot down. And it's not that I am lifting my hip up, but I'm trying to train this hip to really stabilize. And if I'm doing tree pose, then I'm stabilizing from the outside and the inside. So what I'm doing is I'm really pressing the foot down, lifting my hip up, lifting my chest up to stabilize here, but I'm also pushing the foot and the inner thigh together. So then I'm stabilizing from the inside and the outside of the hip joint. So you're adding an even better thing. Anyway, that's enough. That's enough of that. There's going to be more, and there's also experiential recordings included in the course that you can have a little play with these muscles. You can palpate for them, you can find them. We'll be kind of feeling around our bodies, finding these little muscles. So I hope you find it fun. I hope this has been useful. Leave me a comment, share, like, do all the things that social media wants you to do, that the algorithm wants you to do to help me out, so that it's helpful to people. And remember, there's one more place for the £50, not 50%, can't afford that, £50 discount for the full course starting on Monday. Thank you so much to everyone who joined me, and I will hopefully see you on Monday.